It's a Friday afternoon in late autumn. You've just walked out of a building you've entered every single weekday for the last 40 years. There's a card on the break room table. Someone brought a sheet cake. Your name is written on it in blue frosting. A few of your colleagues shake your hand a little too firmly, the way people do when they don't quite know what to say. Your boss says something about legacy, about what you've built here. And then you walk to your car. You sit down, hands at 10 and 2, and for the first time in 40 years, you have absolutely nowhere you have to be. You think that's going to feel like freedom. It doesn't. What it actually feels like, though you won't tell anyone this, not your wife, not your son, not the guys at church, is that someone quietly pulled the floor out from underneath you with a smile and a sheet cake, and you have no idea what just happened to you.
The job, the stakes, the man you became. Think about where this all started. You were young, maybe 19, maybe 22, when you first walked through those doors. The place smelled like machine oil, or cigarette smoke, or bad coffee, depending on what kind of building it was. You weren't there because it was your dream. That's not how your generation thought about work. You were there because someone depended on you. A new wife, a mother who needed rent covered, a future that had to be built from scratch because nobody was handing it over. Your job was simple. You showed up, you performed, you provided. And here's what happened over time. Something quietly, invisibly happening inside you that psychologists call identity fusion. It's when the line between who you are and what you do starts to dissolve, slowly, until one day there's no real difference between the man and the role. You weren't a man who worked at the steel mill, or the phone company, or the printing plant. You were that job. And why wouldn't you be? That job gave you everything. It put shoes on your kids' feet. It gave every single day a shape. Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 3, punch in, punch out. It wasn't just a punch card, it was a contract with reality, a daily confirmation that your presence on this earth had weight. Psychologists talk about something called an external anchor, a consistent role or routine that gives a person their psychological footing. For most men of your generation, work was that anchor. And for 40 years, you never had to think about it, because it was always there. So how did you do it? How did you show up day after day for 40 decades through bad bosses and frozen wages and mornings when your back hurt so badly you could barely stand and just keep going? You did it the only way your generation knew how. You didn't feel it. You just moved. What the routine actually did to your brain. Here's something most people never stop to think about. Your body had been trained over 40 years like a very patient soldier, not by drill sergeants, but by alarm clocks, by shift whistles, by the muscle memory of the same parking spot, the same coffee machine, the same walk from the car to the door. Neuroscientists know today that deeply embedded routines don't just live in your habits, they restructure the brain. The pathways that fire when you park the car, pour the coffee, say good morning to the same faces, those become grooves, deep grooves, worn smooth by decades of the same motion. Your brain had been organized around this job, its rhythms, its demands, its people. And those people, don't underestimate what they meant. The guys you worked with weren't just co-workers. For most men of your era, they were your primary social world. The one you told your jokes to, the one who knew when you were having a rough week without you saying a single word about it. Men of your generation weren't encouraged to build deep friendships outside of work. That wasn't the culture. Vulnerability was something you kept in a locked drawer. So the break room wasn't just a break room. It was the closest thing you had to a community, a place where, without ever using the word feelings, you were somehow known. By today's standards, people might say, why didn't he talk about what he was going through? Why didn't he build a life outside the job? But that question misses the point entirely. The culture you were raised in didn't offer those options. Emotional self-disclosure, the ability to openly name your inner life, has to be modeled from childhood. And most men of your generation grew up in homes where the unspoken rule was, handle it. So you did. You handled it. And the job made it easy, because when you're busy, genuinely, physically, relentlessly busy, you don't have to look inward. The day tells you who you are. So, what happens when the day goes quiet?
The free fall nobody warned you about. Monday morning, the alarm goes off because your body still doesn't know. 40 years of muscle memory doesn't stop because someone handed you a plaque. You get up, you make coffee, you stand at the kitchen window in the gray early light, and then it hits you. Not as some dramatic wave, as something quieter and somehow much worse. There is nothing waiting for you. Psychologists call this the retirement identity crisis, and it's far more common and far more serious than our culture has ever really admitted. The research is pretty consistent. Leaving long-term work is one of the most destabilizing things that can happen to an adult, especially for men whose sense of self was built entirely around what they did every day. It wasn't just a job you lost, it was the answer to the question, who are you? And now, at 65, you have to answer that for the first time, without a script, without a title, in a house that's quiet in ways it never used to be. Your wife might be glad to have you home, or she might be dealing with her own version of this, suddenly having a husband underfoot who doesn't know what to do with his hands. The whole shape of your household had been built around your absence during the day. Now that's shifted, and nobody really talks about that either. And the guys from work, they're still there, still on the floor. The phone doesn't ring the way you thought it might. The lunches you all promised each other happen once, maybe twice, and then quietly stop, the way things do when everyone else's life kept moving. You weren't just retired from a job, you were retired from a world. For some men, this happened fast, a sharp drop into isolation and stillness. For others, it was slow, a creeping flatness settling over each day that looked exactly like the one before it. Psychologists call this the loss of purposive engagement, the deep human need to feel that what you do actually matters. For 40 years, the job answered that need every single morning. Now you're answering it with a lawn that's already been mowed. So how do you get through this? How did the men of your generation survive a transition that nobody prepared them for and nobody talked about? Some didn't, not fully, but some did. And the way they managed it reveals something remarkable about what your working life had actually built inside you, even if you never knew it was there. The invisible inheritance of the long grind. Here's what 4 decades of work actually built underneath all the exhaustion and the early mornings and the punched-out days. It built stress inoculation. Stress inoculation is what happens when a person is exposed to repeated difficulty over a long stretch of time. Like a vaccine introduces a small dose of something that could hurt you, so your body learns to handle it. Endured challenge over years builds a kind of psychological immune system. You'd had bad bosses, layoff scares, stretches where the overtime wasn't enough and the bills still were. You'd faced Mondays that felt like walls you had to walk through anyway, and you walked through them every single time. That repetition, that endurance, didn't just keep the lights on,
It quietly rewired your nervous system to tolerate discomfort at a level that most people raised in softer circumstances simply don't have. It also built what psychologists call a strong internal locus of control, the deep, settled belief that your actions have real consequences in your own life, that you're not just subject to the world, you're capable of moving through it. You earned that belief. Every morning you got up when you didn't want to, every shift you finished when your body said stop. It wasn't just a 40-year career, it was 40 years of daily proof that you could be counted on. That proof lives inside you. It doesn't retire when you do. The men who came through this transition best weren't the ones who replaced the job with golf or daytime television. They were the ones who, often without being able to explain why, found somewhere new to put their capability. A grandchild who needed someone patient, a neighbor's fence that needed fixing, a church that needed a reliable face on Tuesday mornings. They weren't searching for meaning, they were doing what they'd always done. They showed up. Because here's the thing, the job could retire, but the man that job built, the one who gets up when he doesn't want to, who stays steady when things are uncertain, who knows how to be useful without being asked, that man doesn't clock out. What this actually says about you. People sometimes look at men of your generation and see stubbornness, rigidity, an inability to open up, a resistance to anything new. And maybe some of that's fair. But here's what those things actually are when you look at them straight. That stubbornness, it's grit. It's the psychological muscle built from 40 years of not quitting when quitting would have been easier. Researchers who study resilience say it consistently. The ability to persist through difficulty is one of the strongest indicators of long-term well-being. And it's not something you're born with, it's built through exactly the kind of life you lived. That emotional guardedness, the locked drawer, wasn't weakness. It was a coping strategy developed inside a culture that handed you no other tools. It kept you functional when the weight of providing for a family could have broken you. Psychologists call it compartmentalization, and in the right doses, it's a real cognitive skill. The ability to set something aside and keep moving is not the same as being broken. It means you knew how to keep going. And that quietness, that deep, patient, almost geological steadiness that the people close to you have always felt, even when they couldn't name it, that's quiet endurance, one of the rarest things a person can carry. The ability to sit inside difficulty without drama, without falling apart, without needing the world to acknowledge how hard things are. You just carried it. By today's standards, that capacity is genuinely becoming rare. We live in a world that processes everything out loud immediately, that reaches for language and validation before the feeling is even finished forming. You came from a different school, a harder one. And yes, there were real costs to the way you were shaped, things left unsaid to people who needed to hear them, feelings that went underground and stayed there, a loneliness that could sit quietly inside a full house. Those costs were real, and they mattered. But so does this. You made it. Through 40 years of alarm clocks and parking lots and bad Mondays and a retirement nobody warned you about, you made it. You carry something that the modern world has largely stopped teaching, the ability to endure without complaint, to show up without applause, to find meaning in the ordinary act of being useful to the people standing nearest to you. That is not a small thing. That is everything. So if you watched this and recognized yourself, or recognized your father, your grandfather, the man who first showed you what work was supposed to mean, drop a comment below. Tell us what that career gave you. Tell us what it cost you. Because those stories don't belong buried. They belong here, and they belong to all of us.